Picture this. A government wakes up one morning, announces a massive new program, signs the checks, pays millions of people, and only later asks, "So, how are we going to pay for this?" That sounds reckless, almost fictional, but that is how modern governments actually work. Not in emergencies, not as an exception, as the default. Spending first, taxes later. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because this isn't about budgets or deficits. It's about power, about who gets paid, who gets squeezed, and why the bill always seems to arrive years after the promise. Let's start with a simple question that most people never ask. When a government spends money, where does the money actually come from? Most of us were taught a comforting story. Governments collect taxes, they save that money, then they spend it on roads, schools, soldiers, hospitals. Taxes first, spending second. Sounds reasonable, sounds responsible. It's also backwards. In reality, modern governments spend before they tax, every time. Here's how it really works. A government decides to spend. Maybe it's a new highway, maybe it's a welfare program, maybe it's a war. They don't check a bank balance first. They instruct their central bank and treasury to credit bank accounts. Numbers appear on screens. Contractors get paid. Employees get salaries. Benefits land in people's accounts. Only after that do taxes come into the picture. Taxes don't fund the spending in advance. They come later to clean up the mess, to drain money back out of the system, to control inflation, to give the spending a sense of legitimacy. This sounds radical, but it's not theory, it's accounting. Every dollar the government spends must exist before it can be taxed. You can't collect a dollar that hasn't been created yet, so spending always comes first. This wasn't always obvious. For most of history, governments were limited by gold, silver, or foreign currency. They really did need to collect before they spent. That world ended quietly. In 1971, the United States broke the final link between money and gold. From that moment on, money became a political decision. Governments that issue their own currency gained a strange power. They could create money by spending it, and once you have that power, you use it. Fast forward to today, trillions are spent during crises, pandemics, financial collapses, wars. The money shows up instantly. But notice what doesn't happen. There's no emergency tax bill passed at the same time. No press conference saying, "We're raising taxes tomorrow to pay for this." That conversation comes later, quietly, sometimes years later, sometimes never. Instead, governments borrow, which sounds more responsible. We're not printing money, they say. We're issuing bonds. But look closer. Who buys those bonds? Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and often the central bank itself. In other words, the government borrows money that was created by the same system that the government controls. It's like writing yourself an IOU and calling it discipline. The bond doesn't fund the spending. The spending creates the money that buys the bond. This is the hidden loop. Spend, issue bonds, tax later, maybe. And here's where the uncomfortable math appears. If spending always comes first, then taxes can never fully pay for what's already been spent. They only reduce the after effects: inflation, asset bubbles, currency pressure. Taxes are not a funding tool in the way most people think. They are a control tool. They pull money out of circulation. They shape behavior. They create winners and losers. Which brings us to the irony. The loudest political fights are always about taxes. Who should pay more? Who should pay less? What's fair? But the real decision already happened earlier, when the spending was approved. That's when resources were allocated. That's when power shifted. Taxes are just the cleanup crew arguing over the bill. This is why governments can promise things that seem impossible: universal programs, massive subsidies, permanent deficits. As long as inflation stays manageable, the system holds. But inflation is the price tag nobody wants to read. When too much money chases too few real goods, prices rise. Not instantly, not evenly. First, assets inflate: stocks, real estate, luxury items. Later, essentials: food, rent, energy. By the time inflation shows up in everyday life, the spending is old news. The politicians who approved it may already be gone. And now comes the familiar speech. We must raise taxes, we must cut spending, we must be responsible. But notice what rarely gets reversed. The original programs almost never disappear. The temporary spending becomes permanent. The debt rolls forward. New bonds replace old bonds. New taxes replace old promises. The system survives by stretching time. Costs are delayed, pain is deferred, blame is recycled. This creates a strange illusion. It feels like governments are constantly running out of money. They're not. They're running out of room. Room for inflation, room for public trust, room for political tolerance. That's the real constraint. Not dollars, not deficits, but credibility. Once people stop believing the money will hold value, the game changes. History is full of examples. Currencies that worked until they didn't. Governments that spent freely until confidence snapped. The danger isn't spending itself. Every society needs public spending. The danger is pretending that taxes are the source instead of the consequence, because that misunderstanding lets politicians avoid hard choices. They can announce spending today and argue about payment tomorrow. They can buy votes now and shift costs forward. They can grow government quietly while debating taxes loudly, and the public plays along. We argue about rates and brackets and loopholes. We rarely ask the deeper question, what did we already commit to? Once you understand this, headlines read differently. A new spending bill isn't a proposal, it's a fact. A future tax hike isn't funding, it's damage control. And deficits aren't emergencies, they're features. So when you hear that governments need your taxes to spend, pause. They already spent. The real question isn't whether governments can afford to pay. They always can. The question is who pays, when they pay, and whether they notice. Because in this system, the bill doesn't arrive with the purchase. It arrives later, quietly, in prices, in savings, in trust. And the most dangerous part, once spending first becomes normal, there's no obvious moment when it becomes too much. Just a slow realization that the numbers on the screen still work, but the world underneath feels tighter, more expensive, and less forgiving. So, the next time a government announces a bold new plan, remember, the money is already there. The cost just hasn't shown up yet, and by the time it does, will anyone still be asking where it came from?